Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Welcome to Hawthorne. I'm Julian Slowick, and tonight it'll be our pleasure to feed you.
The Menu is a 2022 horror movie about a group of wealthy people traveling to a remote island which houses one of the most exclusive restaurants in the world. Sign up for what is the most unique of restaurant experiences, and they definitely get that and more. Now, this movie is a kind of a difficult one to talk about without revealing spoilers, mainly because, one of the issues I had with the movie itself is it's not terribly deep. Now, it had one card to play, and it's a good card, but once that card is laid on the table about halfway through the movie, there isn't really much left to discover, and you're pretty much just on rails until the end of the film. So, first off, from a 30,000-foot view, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it for its attention to detail and its performances. Ray Fiennes plays Chef Slowick, and he is masterful and such a fun, interesting character that really rides this line of slightly unhinged, tortured artist with a quiet sense of desperation while also being this commanding force in the room. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Margot, who is an unexpected guest to the evening, and she's as good as usual, but the problem is she also doesn't get a ton to really do. I mean, that's not to say she isn't in it. She's essentially the audience surrogate, but she isn't really required to make a lot of choices throughout the film. I mean, nobody does, and that is kind of where the problem is. Now, the movie's well shot, it's clever in places, it is interesting from start to finish, but it had a few major flaws from my perspective and how it handled its characters that prevented me from sort of fully enjoying the movie. Now, if you don't want to know any more, stop this now because I'm going to get into some spoilers. Because it's a horror film, you of course know that there's something up with the restaurant, right? But that isn't the real surprise. The real surprise is that this restaurant was actually 100% above board for quite some time. And then at some point, just before these particular customers showed up, the chef and crew decide that they're just going to burn it all to the ground and take everyone with them. It's kind of an interesting idea about a man who spent his entire life obsessing and refining his craft to the point where nothing else mattered, only to sort of realize his error and then decide to just bring it all down in a fiery blaze. Now, the problem here is we don't get to see this character's decision or the struggle that he had with it. Instead, by the time that we show up, the die's already been cast, and so we're just along for the descent into madness. At no point is there any sort of hesitation from anybody involved. And on top of that, the guests don't catch on for a bit, which is fine, and I get that, and it's done very well to kind of continue to ratchet up tension as each sort of meal course comes out, and each one's stranger than the previous one. But then once they do realize what's going on, they never really make an attempt to change it. Sure, okay, they do some bargaining and there's a few attempts to get away, but for people that are fighting for their lives, they don't really try very hard. This is actually mentioned by the chef himself in the movie, which I think was supposed to be sort of like a clever meta moment, but just kind of pointing out something doesn't necessarily solve that something if it's a problem, at least in my book. Now, Anya's Margot was a last-minute addition to the evening, and she was brought in by Tyler, played by Nicholas Hoult. And Nicholas Hoult is a self-proclaimed foodie, and he's been trying to get a table at this restaurant for months. He originally was going to bring his girlfriend, but they'd broken up, and so then he brings a new date, aka Margot. And this kind of creates a distraction for the chef and his crew because she's the one thing that they did not plan for. And they planned for everything. And so the heart of this movie is really watching Chef and Margot play this little cat and mouse game to try and figure each other out is definitely the best part of the film. But it's also the part of the film that feels like there are actually any obstacles or curveballs. The problem is she's the one that we're supposed to be rooting for in the film, but she ends up not really making any choices herself. And the one choice she does make towards the end of the film, it's supposed to be like some kind of empowering moment, but to me, it just kind of comes off as selfish, and it does not paint her in the best of lights. Now, as for the other characters, they're all fairly cardboard cutout versions of stereotypes we've all seen a million times before. I mean, there's the finance bros, the aging actor of previous fame, like two restaurant critics that are about as obnoxious as you would think. Not much is known about Tyler at all, but once his backstory is revealed, I found his to be the most interesting. Unfortunately, for some reason, they don't really explore it at all. It's kind of just brought up and dropped, which is, I thought, a real missed opportunity. Ultimately, the movie deals with the idea that by taking something and analyzing it to such a degree and making it as exclusive and pretentious, and really as humanly possible, you remove the love that these things have, and they get boiled down to purely just status and nothing else, which robs it of its art and subsequent enjoyment. This is not lost on me as I review movies. But the problem is, outside of its central theme, which is valid and worth exploring, it's never really challenged or achieved through overcoming obstacles. Instead, its theme just kind of plays out as intended. No one plays any other roles other than the one they were cast in from the start. And that ends up leaving me unsatisfied. I'd give this movie a B-, but let me know what you think.